Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And as I try to navigate through these uncharted waters of homeschooling and trying to figure out how to raise and keep my kids preoccupied and stimulated in the age of COVID, the only release and descarga that I can ascertain at this point is continuing this never-ending well of interviews with musicians who are both masters and students. They continue to learn their craft. A lot of them say they continue to practice things that they have to keep learning. But ultimately, at the end of the day, my guest is somebody who's had a really amazing career, and actually a lot of stuff that he probably didn't think would ever really amount to anything other than just a good hang and a good time playing music is actually coming back to up from the roots again in this age of this lack of authenticity, a time that we live in, because a lot of the really important music that was made at a certain time is being rediscovered. People are seeking more than ever before. And at the end of the day, as Paul Schaefer said, you can learn everything. You can learn all the scales and all the notes. And then when you get in with people that are better than you, you forget everything you learned and you let the music come through you from the heavens. Norman Beede, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Yeah. Hey, man, thanks. It's great. It's an honor, man. It's an honor.
You know,
Yeah.
We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to take a listen to this excerpt, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I ended up, going into rehab, and I had to, move out of New York. And, I had been playing, under the influence for so long that I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but, because of when I finally did get, go back and play, I mean, I have good friends in the business, and being able to go back to music straight and still and love playing and be in the same situations with people and not use anymore. I mean, it was good, man. It was great to have that. I could have lost it all, and I didn't. And so, being able to come back to music, looking back on it, helped save my life. Drugs, I don't think they make you play better, but they can ease whatever pain you're going through to help you be able to concentrate on something that makes you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like a lot of times people go to turn to drugs because there's a loss someplace else, or there's a part of their life that's fallen apart. That either you lose a loved one, or you've split up with and you got little kids involved, and you can't see them, so aside from taking drugs to just sort of stay awake so you could take the work, there's something else they do. They numb some pain, and they allow you to at least focus on something that's making you feel good.
All right, Mr. Beede, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Boy, is it the sax player?
It's a drummer. Very, very iconic drummer.
Oh, man.
It's okay. I don't expect it. That was my really a profound moment in my career. August 27th, 2014. That was my first radio interview with Steve Gadd.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if you know his. I mean, there's just a story about. He was using hard drugs. I don't necessarily consider psychedelics or pot hard drug. I mean, that's not really hard drugs in my opinion. But literally, I don't know if you remember. Demiola came out with an album. It was like Elegant Gypsy, I think it was called, and it was like a really intense fusion album in the late '70s. And Demiola told me a story that when he walked into the studio. Gadd was called in for the session. He was literally nodding. He was sleeping. He was out of it when they walked into the studio, and they had to wake him up. And they taped like a huge amount of complex sheet music to the drums, to some kind of stand. I mean, he's basically not even really totally coherent, and he blazes through this entire piece perfectly in the first. I mean, and Demio was like, they're sitting there, their mouths are agape, like, this is the same guy we just saw was passed out in the drum chair. I mean, he was really, and he literally almost lost everything. I mean, he couldn't see his kids. He had to go away. He couldn't play music. And then he was, because he had connections in the business, he not only was able to get back into music, but continued to thrive. And, I just wanted to know from you, I mean, it's a very lonely existence being an artist sometimes. For all the adulation and fame, it can be a very lonely pursuit. And I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about if you have ever reached the bottom of the pit, and if you realized that was actually the best place to be, because that's when realism was activated, and at that point you overcame whatever you were fighting and cleared out the dark places in your heart and became a better person and musician.
Yeah, I mean, when I was listening to him talk, I was totally relating to what he was saying. I went through a period of about 10 years where it started out with marijuana, and then did a little bit of psychedelics, not a lot, and then discovered alcohol when I lived on the canals in Venice.
Oh boy!
In 1972.
Oh, wow! That what a beautiful place. I mean, I was also gonna. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. I've never actually been to that area. I've always been kind of fascinated by it. But that would have been a great time to be in the canals of Venice, California.
Yeah, it was really different than now. I mean, they were talking about the city was talking about filling them in, and it was really hippie haven back then, and I rented a little cottage about just about a half a block or less from the canals. I could see them. At that time, it was an empty lot. Now it's got a 3-story building on it, but I could actually see the canals. And we used to call him Buddy the Duckman. Lived across. He was a bass player, I think, for Benny Goodman and Lawrence Welk or something like that.
Benny the Duckman.
Buddy, I think was his name. Bass player. I don't remember his last name. We're talking, Jesus, maybe almost 50 years ago now. I hate to say it, but 40 something for sure. It was 72, set to 75. I lived there, and the pretenses about being a classical musician, serious classical musician. I was working on Charles Ives sonata, and also trying to learn how to play blues at the same time. And blues won out. I still play classical. I still do it. I still can do it, but the blues really won out in terms of my attentions, and that was a great time to be there. Yeah. It was
but cool. You said you discover after a while you were able to even do incredibly productive work, but it was under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah, well, actually, alcohol and marijuana, and there was a period of time in the late 70s. I fell in love and moved out of that little place in Venice and moved into an area in LA called Mount Washington.
Oh my God, that's
gal
that. I mean, dude,
Lovelace.
Dr. Patrick Gleason, the synth czar, lives up. I've been up there. That place is so Zen-esque, man.
Oh, it was
Jesus,
great.
man,
It
you
was
were living
great.
in the. I mean, and you know
Yeah.
what was so cool because it was actually affordable at that time. But continue.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, living in LA was affordable back then, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah. But so at that time, I had just gotten this gig at Cal State Los Angeles playing for dancers, and it was a regular salary. It wasn't a ton of money. It was like 3/4 time, and it was only 10 months. But I'm like a poor musician, and to me, it's a ton of money.
Absolutely.
If I pay the rent and I can buy my burgers and omelets, then I'm good, man. I'm pretty good. Just give me my time to practice, and I had the summers off, and it was really kind of a wonderful time. And during that time, just about the time this gal and I split up, the fellow I worked with, his name's Craig Kupka. We decided that we were going to make some albums together for modern dance, and nobody in modern dance had ever had like 8 to 12 or 13-minute cuts. Everything on an album was just sort of a way of saying this is what you can do instead of actually giving them something that they could play for the class.
Dig.
And it turned out we did 3 of those, and they ended up in pretty much every dance office or dance department library all around the country, and we would get a little check every year for a while. And then it turned out one of those, the very first piece we did, this is one of those that I'm just jamming on a Crumar, and I was stoned at the time.
Yeah. It's fine.
We didn't do all of those albums stoned. I mean, some of it was some, we were really playing some stuff, and we had to stay clean until we got done. Then we'd party, or we do some of the overdubs, after partying a little bit. But that very first piece, which I never really liked, just like you said, who would have known? I mean, I just got an email from somebody, I think in Germany, who wanted that cut. They're putting it on a compilation of something, and I don't know what.
Did they want it for like? Did they want it? I'm just curious. Like in this day and age, you were doing something different because you were doing longer, stretched out dance tracks instead of like little demo kind of things. And did that cat in Germany want something to sample, or did he just want the whole track to put on something?
Well, he wanted the whole track, but it's funny you should say sample, because that very thing, that very piece, I think it was about 10 years ago or so, my nephew Austin calls me up and says, "Hey, Uncle Norm, I just heard a tune that sounds like your Rain piece in the background." Like
No way.
Yeah.
No way. Wait, is this wait, hold on. Hold on. This is a different piece, not what the guy in Germany wanted.
No, it was it's the same piece.
Oh, so 5 years ago, Austin Beede, some of the biggest ears in all the land, is listening to like
some pieces, like I don't know whether it was house or what it was. That's crazy, man. And
you're like, yo, I'm losing my mind right now. I would have lost my mind.
Yeah. He sent it to me, and I said, yeah, you're right. That's the piece, because this gets my crazy, just sort of like stoned out jamming, jamming in the background. Yeah. And it was like, it cracked me up, because I said, that was the first piece on all 3 of those albums. It was really the first piece Craig and I ever recorded. And he just said, just jam a 6/8 or 12/8 or something, and then we'll add a little bit of percussion or something, and then put the rain sound, and we'll have a piece. And to me, it was like that was the piece I was most embarrassed about. This is a piece of crap, and it's the one now people want. So it's like
you know what it is. It's so funny you bring that up, because I just feel like as an artist or like true creatives, I can listen back to when I first started my show 9 years ago, and I can hear these interviews with DeJohnette or Richard Davis or all these guys that came on my show, and I'm like, stumbling over myself trying to, like, I'm too insecure to ask. I know what I want to ask, but I'm too insecure. And yet, and at the time, and it's cringeworthy, but then, like, through it all, maybe you'll never totally appreciate it, or you think you were wanking it or something, but, you just never know what's going to inspire other peeps. I mean, that's kind of the unquantifiable thing about art in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was one of those that got inspired by people who thought they were doing, crappy stuff. And then I guess I became one of those too, But yeah, it's just, the bottom line is you just get in and you do it. And then in the dance world, I guess in the music world too, in many ways, you have a deadline, and the piece has to be done. And we have to move on. If it's not perfect, that's fine. And you find out later on that sometimes what you thought was the most imperfect part was the very most important thing that made it unique.
How does that, you like, it's just something where you didn't necessarily hit a clam or a wrong note, but you just didn't like your attack or something? I mean, take it from...
So sometimes it is what you think might be a clam, but
that makes it. No, that's what David Spinoza told me when he, right place, wrong time. Arif Mardin and Dr. John brought him in. He was on his way to another jingle, and he got his amp set up, and they said, listen, we're doing this tune for the meters. There was going to be a horn solo, but we'd rather put a guitar solo on it. So Spinoza, tunes up for a minute. He's like, he only had a little bit of time. He runs through his solo, and he had a huge clam in the middle of it, and he's like, okay, I'm going to do that again. They're like, nope, we're done. It's all good. And literally he's in a cab with like three guitars, maybe a few weeks later, and the cabbie's like, yeah, man, check this out. He's like, you're a musician. This is my new favorite tune. And he throws on Right Place, Wrong Time, Dr. John. And Spinoza's like, dude, that's my solo. And the guy's like, you're full of shit, man. But the point is, but it was like, he literally, there's a flub in that solo, but somehow it made the song,
Yeah. It's a weird thing, man. It's a weird thing. I don't quite understand it, but
let me ask you a question. I want to ask you this. Yeah, no, this is really important because, when you probably were around. We'll see. I mean, Glenn Moore from Oregon, the bass player, he told me, in the mono era, piano players especially, people took pride. Tatum, I mean, the list goes on and on, but, you could tell who was playing within the first 8 bars. And then when stereo came in, it made it even harder to detect individuality. And then when the Fender Rhodes came in, it really masked any kind of individual sound, with the exception of a few people. Yeah. And I just wonder, how you set about putting aside what you think is good and what's not, because clearly some of the stuff that's resonating now, you're not always the best judge of your own art, but how did you attempt to create and find your own individual sound?
Well, that's interesting. It just developed over time, and part of it was, and then once again at Cal Arts in 1971, and both times I was just a horrible student, and all I did was played. I practiced and I played, and so when I was about 31, 32, I played dance classes for about 10 years, and get a lot of practice improvising in a modern class. And I was lucky to find the university that had emphasis on the modern as opposed to ballet. Although I could always cover ballet because I studied classical up to the almost not the highest level, but pretty high. And it got to where I just couldn't get, I'd sit down and I'd hear something in my head and I couldn't play it. So I looked up this old teacher of mine, Bill Mathieu, and started studying with him.
Allaudin, yeah.
Allaudin Mathieu.
Allaudin, thank you. I mean, dude, the guy was just for the audience listening out there, Allaudin was responsible for starting the Fairfax Street Choir. He was very involved with Sufi, mystical music, dance music, and was, I mean, a mentor to so many cats, and his spirit remains. Continue. So I mean, so he stretched it even further. He even stretched your mind and ears even more.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't really studied theory and harmony. At the time I studied with him, it was about 16 years, from 83 to 99. And that was about that time he said, go write pieces and bring them back. You're done.
We're done. You go on your own. Yeah, take the lifeboat out there. Yeah. Right.
Go out into the world, my son.
Yes, son.
And so, but he was writing this book. I was now looking at it right now, called The Harmonic Experience, and it's like about 500-page kind of unified theory for harmony for the world, basically. Because he had studied with Pandit Pranath about the time that I left the conservatory. He had started studying with Pandit Pranath. He became friends with Terry Riley, the composer.
Yeah. Oh, God.
And,
Jesus.
and he was just really exploring. He'd already was the original music director for Second City back in the late 50s, and worked with Alan Arkin and Ed Asner when they were all like 20-year-olds.
That's when George Marsh was doing Second City in Chicago with that first group of Saturday Night Live entertainers. Absolutely. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. And they would play musical games a lot. I mean, did you guys play games? What were the games like? I mean, especially in the early 80s when you started. I mean, some of it was like, can you talk about, I mean, did you play games with different types of actors and actresses in his program?
Actually, at the conservatory, it was strictly music. Mm-hmm. And this is, by the way, this is 68 to 70. I mean, this is way back.
Well, no, but I mean, it actually is in the most amazing time. I mean, Musiki Dwayne Robertson was there. George Duke was either right around that. Yeah. I mean, everybody, all the cats, Pete Magadini, all the cats that I've interviewed, they were all there. It was a hotbed of activity.
Yeah, Duke had graduated from the conservatory the year before I got there. And I didn't even know his name until the early 80s when I started listening to pop more.
Sure.
Seriously. And I got one of his synth albums. It just blew me away, and who is this guy? And then I found out that he was one of Zappa's players since in the early 70s when I got turned on to Zappa. And that was another thing about living on the canals. I started exploring different styles, and I discovered McCoy Tyner, I discovered Zappa, Mahavishnu, Charlie Parker, and and all that stuff that I hadn't really been introduced to very much in the music schools that I went to, even though people were hep to it there. My focus had been towards classical, so I really started to realize, there's this whole world out there that I could be a part of because I'm improvising, and I went, wow, this is just unbelievable. But back then the games we would play were things like repeat and repeat. Each player keeps looping back, but to different places. It's all about listening, and that was the thing that was so important in that. And by the way, that class was on Sundays at 9 a.m. because it was the only time Allaudin could get a room where you couldn't hear 20 other musicians.
Exactly. Right. Silence.
Play. Yeah. And I've been a great student in high school, but I practiced 3, 4, 5 hours a day all the way through high school. I had basically no social life. I was a teenage classical music groupie, and I go to every concert at the Hollywood Bowl and go backstage. I got kicked out sometimes.
That's cool.
Eugene Normandy kicked me out one time. Yeah. So for me, when I went to the conservatory, man, I was ready to let loose. I didn't want to go to classes or anything. I just wanted to play, And so the only class I really made every time, and if I had to miss it for some reason, if I had to go back to Orange County for something, it was like a real bummer because it was like, this is the Holy Grail, man. that class on Sunday mornings was the class I made every class, and it was magic. It verified for me that I was on this that composing and improvising, which my piano teacher and before high school had tried to get me to stop doing, but it verified that I was on the right path.
Did you find at that time that you were, I mean, everybody begs, borrows, and steals from their idols or people they listen to, and then they got to kind of cut through that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, did you already feel like you were developing your own tone, style at that point? I mean, what I'm curious about is like, individual sound, and a lot of that has to do with, where when you hit the notes and the placement of the notes and the conversation you're having. But, you listen back. I mean, I listen back to, I still have an analog cassette deck in the house, and I throw on Live at the Village Vanguard with Bill Evans, Scotty LaFaro, and Paul Mochian. And, it literally, and I don't understand why, maybe I'm just really making myself believe it, but it never sounds the same. It never sounds the same. It's not like I've listened to both sides on the tape, and every time, whether it's, Over the Rain, Alice in Wonderland, or, these tunes, it's like the conversation they're having is so unique that it seems to ultimately change. There's no predictability in it because mainly LaFaro was just going way out. But, that conversational trio work in the 60s is sort of, that's really, for me, was the ultimate authenticity of music. You had Birth of the Cool, and you had all this wild, Stan Getz did Focus at that time. And I'm just trying to figure out really if you could talk a little bit about a defining moment when you really felt like you owned your voice on the apparatus.
Yeah. For me, I think it was. I feel like I'm a bit of a late bloomer because I had a style of playing during that time, like the conservatory days and so into the Cal Arts days. So it'd be like 68 to 72 or 3. That was pretty dissonant, and I could create some very believable dissonant stuff.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
No. Oh, I love it.
I love that. I live on. I could live on that for days.
Yeah, I could play a piece and people think, "Oh, is that Schoenberg or was that Stockhausen or, what is that?" And Cecil Taylor's one that gets into the dissonant thing too a lot. But yeah. So, but then I got to this place where I thought, for dancers they want to hear something pretty sometimes, but I didn't want to do something that was inane, But sometimes they want something that a musician might think was inane. But so I got into doing stuff that was very pretty and melodic, and that was, and that really worked really well in my 20s. And I came up with some pretty good melodies and things that, and even some sophisticated harmonic stuff. Although that came later after I started studying with Allaudin. But I could do like a left-hand motor rhythm and create a really nice melody. That like there's pieces on the dance albums that even still people use, and for maybe 4 or 5 different choreographers. So I have this really, kind of like extremes. I have this very melodic, very pretty, almost new agey side, and then I also have this very dissonant, sort of jagged, sometimes jagged side.
Oh, I'm gonna continue to push Norman Beede to the jagged side at all costs. Let's put in a piece of music here that you foisted on me, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Yeah.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you by Abbott Taylor Jewelers, Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance, and Dr. Diggs of Butch Diggs Dental. And whether or not they are essential workers or not, we thank them for their support, so we could play tunes like that for Norm and Beede. 5-minute break. Before we get into dissecting the piece, Miles Davis was bored to death of bebop because it was at a certain point he got bored to death of it because, basically they were playing, just American songbook stuff, and maybe they'd leave the head of the tune and break it out, and let it fly. But ultimately he was searching for a new sound, and, that's what led to Bitches Brew and Jack Johnson and all those records. And, Mahavishnu could be in that bag as well. Dizzy obviously created bebop, but, when you talk about modern classical, modern dance, is a lot of that, is the word modern connotate the fact that there's an actual trap set or rhythmic component to it? Because I've always sort of looked at classical music as, with the exception of like really heady people like Harry Partch, who had he may not even be a good example, but people that were using timpanis and big drums, like you'd have some percussion, but for the most part, it's pretty cerebral stuff. So would you say that part of what you're, introducing a trap set to classical music would make it modern, do you think?
Well, actually, modern dancers, they're very eclectic, and especially have gotten very eclectic, and they use anything from, like you said, Harry Partch, to they create their own sounds now. They use GarageBand and do their own scores. But they use classical music. They use jazz. When I started playing modern back in '71, a lot of the modern dancers and the different styles, the ballet dancers weren't really into talking that much with the modern dancers, and none of them want to talk to the jazzers, the jazz dancers.
Exactly.
So if I played a blues lick, like in a modern class in the early '70s, I'd sometimes get a dirty look from a teacher, and she'd say well, this isn't a jazz class. Okay.
I'm surprised you didn't get taken to the wood. I'm surprised they didn't take you to the woodshed back then.
But,
no, it was so cool because you were sort of antagonizing in a really good way, trying to stretch vocabulary, but at that time it was just sacrosanct to do that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that for everybody,
right.
but that was a time, when people were a little more sensitive about stylistic purity. But in 1993, I got hired at UC Irvine for the dance department there, and they hired me as the eventually a couple of years later the head staff musician, where I was there for 26 years until last year, and I was really honored and lucky and blessed to play for a man named Donald McHale. And I remember the first time I played all blues for him, and he just looked at me and smiled and said, "Yeah, Norman." And he's a modern dance icon.
So he was digging the blues licks.
Oh yeah, and I honed my blues and my jazz playing for him for 20-some years.
Wow.
So I have to credit him along with Allaudin with giving me the space to practice my art and make some bucks at the same time. It's really and he's a great artist. He passed away a couple of years ago, but they did an honorary concert for him in Lincoln Center last winter, and I wasn't able to make it. I wasn't in good health at the time, but he danced with all the great choreographers of the 20th century, or he taught the ones at the late 20th century into the 21st. He's an icon. So I was really, really, plus he was a civil rights activist of sorts. He was 80-something, passed away. Donald McHale. Yeah, it was just, so, things change, things change over time. And the dance world in and of itself has really exploded, especially in Los Angeles. So there's a lot of work, not at the moment, but people are doing things online. But I'm playing for Zoom classes for ballet and modern for American Ballet Theater right now, a couple times a week. And
I'm curious about something. Let me ask you something, because my friend tried to. I was supposed to be in New York last weekend to see Grateful Shred, pay homage to all my brothers and Let the Body Dance, and obviously that didn't happen. So we tried to set up a Zoom cast with Dan Horn and Austin and McDougal and the guys to play their show from November of last year. And my buddy, who did not anticipate getting he didn't think those cats would come to the table, but they did. And he was not prepared for the audio. And I'm wondering, when you do these Zoom classes, do you get feedback on the audio quality of the people that are receiving your vibration?
Yeah, it's they prefer to have the live music, even though it's not of great quality, to having some sort of CD coming over the line.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. That's important. They prefer the live. But it is lacking, right? I mean, it's not. There's no at this point. Yes. It doesn't have the capacity to give it that real warm, beautiful, buoyant sound.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't.
Right.
But it's what we've got,
Absolutely.
At this time. So.
I mean,
by the way, the drummer on that piece, is my nephew Austin. I think he was about 20 when he recorded that.
No way. Yeah, I love. Well, it was cool because, again, just going back to when I think of, I've interviewed Chris Parker and so many drummers that were playing for strippers, and they really have to hit their moves. They'd have to play to their moves. And in the 60s, Ella Fitzgerald and, Duke Ellington tunes, bassy tunes, those were still popular tunes of the day. You never knew what they were going to shout out, maybe, whatever it was. But ultimately, the dance steps, there's all this, the word that comes to mind is coordination. There needs to be coordinated steps. And in that piece we just heard, it starts kind of formulaic and then begins to break up time and form. So is that more, I guess I'm just trying to get at the essence of modern classical dance is the idea that it can it's almost a fusion of all musics, and you can figure out ways of, it's not traditional dance steps. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It can go from something in 2/4, 3/4 to free form for a while. Sometimes on a dancer or choreographer will say, okay, improvise for 20 seconds, and then you go into the 7/8 or something.
Right.
So it can be very complicated for the musician, but you take it off the cues, like the guys you're talking about playing for strippers. That you take it off. It's a visual cue, and I think that was one of the attractions for me. Was that in trying to form some sort of style or what it is I do. I love classical music. I fell in love with jazz and rock and roll in my 20s. It was like I couldn't figure out what it is I wanted to do. So I was, playing for dancers was a great way to kind of just kick around all the different styles and somebody would say, oh, I want jellyfish in space,
yeah, right.
And
right,
okay. So I would do something a little bit of maybe Satie mixed with Dominique Frontiere or something, So it's a very creative space, and I love working with modern dancers for that reason. There were some that are very like Martha Graham, who were very, very strict. And the stories of working with her are very fascinating stories. Sounds like working with, like somebody like I can't think of it.
No, I mean, the first cat that came to mind was Max Roach. He was he could be a drill sergeant, and the thing is, he wanted his cats to learn the tunes by ear quickly, and then. Once like Stanley Cowell said that, he would get up Max Roach would get up on the bandstand during a concert and start giving him grief about it, and Cowell knew that he knew what he was doing, so it didn't let him affect him. But yeah, I mean, there was some of these creatives, they get deep into what they want to hear, and they I don't want to say rigid, but they just they're going to ring you out till you actually play that. I wanted to. This is I don't have it queued up, the audio, but I went to Ojai, California a couple years ago and was able to, sit in the house and be treated to a house concert and do a Facebook Live interview with Roger Kellaway. And he said,
"Oh my gosh!"
Yeah, I mean, and the guy's one of my biggest fans. He's on Facebook, always chiming in on my I love the guy, and I want to read you this and then extrapolate on an experience or the closest thing you had to it. He said, Interdeterminacy was the name of the album. The concept was John Cage was, whatever John Cage was doing in his room and whatever David Tudor was doing in his room, they couldn't hear each other. So you and I were listening to this album, Interdeterminacy, and you and I were listening to the result of what the two of them were doing in time and space. There was no post-production. We're the ones who got the results. You're dealing with two extremely creative people. Both of them have a sense of space. Maybe that's the answer. Of course, it could have turned out to be complete chaos. And the idea there is you have two guys who are allowing the muse and the music to come through them in separate rooms. And the name of this album is Interdeterminacy. I don't know if you're hip to that album, but
No, but I will get it.
No, I mean, I want you to check it out, Norman, because I mean, this was about as experimental as have you gotten to? I don't believe you and Austin were. I mean, then maybe Austin had some baffles up or something, but you weren't in separate rooms. But that is about.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, this is about as stretched out, as creative as. I mean, have you ever got? What's the most avant? I mean, I remember talking to Gordon Edwards and the bass player for Stuff, and he was a studio cat, and he said that they'd have 3 floors of the building sometimes taken up. One would be the string section, one would be the rhythms. I mean, I don't even remember what he said, but it was like it was done in isolation, but in some ways it was also done with blind faith. And I wonder about the most experimental avant-garde, not even something that got pressed on record, but the most sort of, just getting into the lab and being scientific and weird. What was the strangest collaboration you've had?
Wow, that's a good question. A lot of the stuff that I did, the piece I did with Austin, I actually had him record the drum set. It was actually a couple of years or more before I actually did the piece.
Interesting.
And I added the keyboard part in the studio. Well, when I was at the conservatory, I worked with some people. We had a new music ensemble, and then that ensemble with Allaudin was pretty out there at times. I remember in Venice, a buddy of mine from high school was getting into songwriting, and we were doing a little bit of acid and
sounds great. It just sounds fantastic, really.
Yeah, it's a very creative time. But we decided to do what we call a conglomerate, and we would write.
Whoa.
We would write in different parts of my little cottage, and he would write like the treble clef, and I would write the bass clef, and then I'd play it, and it was some interesting stuff. I've thought about doing albums like that with people who improvise, but generally I would say some of the weirdest stuff I've done has been usually in modern dance, where we'll just say we'll play for 3 minutes, or not. Actually, what comes to mind is working with Rudy Perez. He was a choreographer. He's in the postmodern category. He's still alive. He's in his 90s, and he teaches in West LA on Sundays, pre-COVID. But
no, hold on a second. Wait, is he still cogent though? I mean, I need to catch a hang with this guy right away.
Oh yeah. No, he's very. Yeah, I ran into him the other day.
Oh my God!
I had to play for some classes out on West Side, and he was teaching a handful of his devoted students. But I remember my first classes I played for him in L.A. at the High School for the Arts in the first years that existed back in the 80s. And I would come into class and I'd say, well, what do you want to hear? And he says, we're just going to dance.
Oh, I love
and you play what you want to play.
Baby. Yeah, baby.
You know?
Damn.
It took me 2 or 3 classes to really trust that that's what he really meant and that that's what he wanted. And so he commissioned me to write a piece for him one time, Mozart and Debussy, and compiled them in some strange way. But that was probably the most far out I got. And it was, it's all music that went up into the air in a dance class, but it was also a time that was really helping me, like I said, with Donald McHale. That time for me was also a time of exploration. So when he said, play what you want, I actually had to get into what it was I wanted to play. And that was fascinating stuff.
When he said, I just want to dance, he's talking about letting the body dance, like just go with, there was no chord charts or anything like that. It was just play free, but listen.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, there was no modern. There's no chord charts, man.
Jesus, this is. You're telling me that went up into the air. Or did that get capped? Did you record that?
I don't know that I recorded any of that.
Wow.
To be honest with you, yeah. I've done a lot of recording. I've done some recording of pure improvisation, but not all of that is out there stuff. Some of it's very coherent.
Let me ask you though. This is also you mentioned McCoy Tyner, and you had your hand. Just a couple of things in my mind here. The first thing is there were certain when I talked to guys like Mike Finnegan, who was part of the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood, and just a monster organ player, and they did an album in '72 called The Brother. Mort Marsh and Mel Graves were the rhythm section. Finnegan and Jerry Hahn, and but before that, Finnegan had a mixed race band in Kansas City, and they would play tunes like, Put It Where You Want It by the Crusaders, or, Les McCann tunes, compared to what? Things like that. And I just wanted you to talk to cats out there in this time who are really, maybe they're insecure to admit it, but they really want to stretch their vocabulary out, and they're playing generally R&B, rhythm and blues, and rock. And why are certain jazz tunes, like Crusaders tunes, like those types of tunes that I brought up, more accessible to somebody who might be more inclined to play rock and R&B, as opposed to, the real McCoy or Love Supreme and things like that. We go back to this taste of the blues. But if you were going to talk to younger students about increasing their musical vocabulary and stretching into these quasi jazz tunes, what would be your approach?
Well, I do teach mostly classical pianists how to improvise. And so my approach is to listen to the music. This is from Allaudin. This is
Well, he's with us today, man. He is down. He is looking down on us today.
Oh yeah. Well, he's still with us, man. He's up there in the Bay Area. Still
wait. I thought he passed away.
Oh no. Unless it happened in the last month, because.
Okay. I thought Marsh told me he had passed on. Okay, so I need to go to him immediately. All right, go ahead.
Oh, I hope not. In fact,
No. I thought this was no. This was like a couple of years ago, so he's definitely still with us. So I was just wrong. Yeah.
No, because I went to a Terry Riley concert a couple of months ago, and I talked to him afterwards, and I asked him if he'd seen Allaudin, and he said, "Oh yeah, he had just seen him the month before. They hung out and played music."
Dude, you have opened this portal. I'm obsessed with Riley. If you can connect me with Riley, I need to talk to that cat.
Oh yeah, sure. I have his email.
That's fine. No. Listen, Beede. You are like in. Do you feel We're going to have to do part 2 like next week because there's so much we didn't even get. I mean, we just blew through an hour here, but it's like,
It's hard to believe.
do you believe that you are just, I mean, I hate to say this. I mean, I don't mean to hate to say it. Do you feel like you're kind of just beginning to continue to learn in some ways?
You nailed it, man.
Yeah, man.
I mean, that was part of the reason I retired from the university last year. I just kind of hoped to go another year, but I had some medical stuff come up, and I needed to recover, and hiring and firing part-time musicians, mostly hiring. I almost never had to fire anybody, but arranging for that, and I just didn't have time to compose or to study. And I feel like I need another. I'll be 70 in November. I feel like I need a good 30, 40 years of a strong body and a clear mind to get the work done. So I said, that was why. Yeah, that's why I retired, because I'm writing a couple books, one on music and one just about my own personal life and my personal spiritual journey, partly.
Well, I mean, let's just put it this way. I mean, let's continue to collaborate, because my hope is that some of the stuff that we will dive into, and maybe already have, will add new content to any of these books. Part of it is like rediscovering things, or talking about things that you've either never talked about or hadn't thought about during a particular time. But it's like you're in a pocket of music that is, I would say, I don't know what the right word is. I mean, it's like, it's singular, it's unique. And that's not to say that other people, you've had mentors, but that's the whole key in any art form, especially in the days that we live in now, which we're saturated with material. I mean, before it was, you would hear something on the radio, like a Creedence Clearwater tune or something by the Swampers and Muscle Shoals, and maybe you'd have an opportunity to hear it. You didn't have a rewind button. Maybe it was on the, you had to, then it would sort of just you'd have to improvise it in your head. And the whole part of it now is that there's so much material that a lot of younger cats, because they're insecure, rightfully so, this is a comping time. And we don't need any more comping. We don't need any more of that. We don't need any more formula trips. We need people that are, and I know there are people willing to stretch out, but the problem is, unfortunately, without a music business anymore, it's really hard to do any kind of monetization of taking chances. So it's this very interesting, and I feel like you're bridging those gaps in some way. And I think that the Smithsonian Folkways, the Folkways, reincarnation of this dance stuff is proof in the pudding.
Yeah. By the way, that's Crystals is coming out. You can pre-order.
No, I just want you to just before we wrap set one, tell the audience the story about that. You guys were, puffing some ganja, but at the same time making stuff up. I just want people to understand that in the early '80s, you guys were just having fun, and because it was, and then all of a sudden something just this happened just within the last couple months or maybe half a year.
Yeah, they've been talking about it for a year, but it's actually now on their website. It's an album that came out in '82, but before that we had one. That's Folkways. Before it was Smithsonian put out Clouds, and that was the one where we it was like a reincarnation of the Ghost Opera, only with the purpose of doing something ambient or new agey. And our drummer had said, "Hey, we've got some success with these modern dance albums. Let's do something new age, because that's the craze." It was like 79, 80,
Yeah, this was like Wyndham Hill stuff. Yeah.
We're all going, "No, give us a break. We're not going to do that stuff." I used a different word, but but finally he convinced us, and so he said, "Okay, here's what we'll do." I told him about the Ghost Opera album, and I said, "Let's just do this." Well, and Craig and I did this together. Craig was really the instigation for all these projects, and we said, "Okay, we'll record, we'll get high, and we'll jam in A minor."
I love it.
And we had about 5 or 6 different musicians. We recorded about 6 hours, I think, maybe not even that many hours. And Craig went into the studio and did did he spliced tape. He found the good sections and he spliced them. And we sent it to Folkways, and I guess he heard right back from, I think his name was Ash. Sam, no, it wasn't Sam Ash, that's a record company.
Yeah,
but anyway,
yeah.
The director of Folkways sent him a letter right back, says, we love it, we're going to do it. So that came out, I think, in 80 or 81. And that's a bit of an ambient underground classic. And that was one of those, I didn't even keep copies of it because I didn't think it was any good. And now I listen, now I'm listening to it and I'm going, oh.
Dude, that's fine. That adds to the mystique of it. That is what this is about. Because, Norman, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, you know what? Like, I'm so happy that I'm able to get stuff out of my system and create some books, and I have an angel of a publisher come along, and these things just have a way of like if you do it with true, pure intentions, it may happen. I mean, there may be a rebirth in your lifetime. That's the blessing here, is to try to recognize and smell the roses, because in my case, in a lot of people's artistic cases, they have to reside to the fact that in some ways this stuff could become incredibly prescient long after we've left this planet. So I think it's truly about constant creation and recognizing that you don't know anything and you should just be playing, period, and not even thinking, and not even worrying about it.
Yeah.
So
that's the crux. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Norman, man, we're living in the age of COVID. I would have been out. I was going to be out in LA 2 weeks ago. I mean, I want to come out and do a Facebook Live interview with you, but this is the best we got for now, man. So let's just set up a time to do part 2 real soon, because we didn't even get into a ghost opera today.
I know. Yeah. That was the beginning for me. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. I can't wait.
All right, man. Much love to you and the family, man. All the best to you, and just stay safe. All right.
Likewise, man. I'm looking forward to getting your book in delivered here soon.
Love you, buddy. Take it easy.
Love you too.
All right, be safe. Yeah, later. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, man. What a legend. Norman Beede. And we'll be right back with Carrie Cross on the other side.